Welcome to the Brass and Woodwind Shop. This is the fourth video in the Building a Slide Trumpet series. In a previous video, if I remember correctly, I mentioned that I was not going to lacquer this, but my friend was. Well, I changed my mind and I decided that I am going to lacquer it. What I'm going to do, since I have all the pieces right here, these are the pieces that need to be lacquered. Those are going to be a lot easier to buff and clean up while they're in pieces like this, so I'm going to buff those now. Some of the pieces were silver plated and a lot of the silver plating is gone, so I'm just going to buff the silver plating off of here. The silver plating is very thin, it should come off very easily. Usually I would not buff off silver plating, but the fact that it's most of the way off already and it's severely tarnished, I'm just going to buff that off and it's going to be brass when it's done. These are all the pieces that I'm going to buff right here. I'm not going to do the bell right now, I will do that one later, because the bell is going to be just like this. This is not going to change much. So I can do the bell at any time. But right now I'm going to do these pieces because they're going to be a lot easier while they're in pieces rather than when they're together. So this is the spindle that holds the buffing wheel, and I'm going to put that in the bench motor and tighten that up. And then I'm going to put on the buffing wheel, and this is the thicker of the two buffing wheels. I'm going to start with the wider one, and always wear safety glasses when you do this. And some buffing gloves. This is the Triple E buffing compound, which is the coarsest of the buffing compounds that I use a lot on instruments. I'm going to use this buffing wheel to get off the rest of the solder. There's a very thin layer. I'm going to buff that off. And also I'm going to buff up the tarnish. There's some pretty heavy tarnish on here. And there's some lacquer on this piece. So I'm going to buff all that up. The Triple E compound and buffing wheel are not the final buff, but this is going to be the first buff to clean up the stuff. And it's a coarse grit, so it's going to clean it up fairly quickly. There, now that piece is done. Now I'm going to buff one of the little cork barrels. I'm not going to go into detail about buffing because I did some videos on buffing in the past, but I will leave the links in the description below to those videos if you want to watch those. And this is the one of the pieces that had the silver plating on it, and the silver plating is coming off easily. That's because it's very thin after 100 years of wear, so that is not hard to do. Okay, that one is done. Now I'm going to do this one. This has lacquer on it. The lacquer should buff off easily. Oh, you know what? There are still a few dents on there. I should get those dents out before I buff it, though, so I'm going to do that real quick. There are a few dents there that I want to get out before I buff it, because if I do it after I buff it, it's not going to look as good. And those should go very quickly. Let's see. One more dent there. Come on. There it is. Yeah, I don't know how many people talk to their dents while they work on them. I usually do. I know it seems a little odd, but it does work sometimes. There it is. It's all done. Okay, I'm ready to buff this piece now. And this will take off the lacquer and the solder. When you buff, sometimes you lose control of the parts and they go flying to the floor. Well, if everything goes well, they go flying to the floor. If it does not go well, they can go flying at you or somewhere else in the shop. So, but if you hold on carefully and you know what you're doing, usually you can hold on to the pieces. But sometimes they get caught on something and it just throws it down. One way you can avoid that, though, is to keep it below the halfway point on the wheel. Here's about the halfway point. You need to keep it a little bit below that. And then if it grabs, then it will just pull away from it. But if you're higher than that, if it grabs onto it, it's going to pull it into the wheel, and then you lose it. So I try to be careful to not lose parts. Usually you don't get hurt on parts, but the parts can be damaged, and you do not want things to be damaged because then it just makes more work for yourself. So try to be very careful, especially on the small pieces. The small ones are always more likely to go flying than the big ones. I'm done buffing most of the lacquer off of here, and also the dents that were in here, they're almost invisible now. Buffing further takes out the dents so that it's almost invisible. And the reason you can see dents after you're done removing them usually is because the lacquer has been damaged, and what you see is more of the lacquer that is damaged than the metal. So those dents are, they're hard to see. You can still tell a little bit that they were there. But now I'm going to remove the lacquer that's in the inside of the crook, and I'm going to put the smaller wheel on here to do that. That will get inside of there better. Okay, now the inside. Okay, got all of the lacquer off of there, so that one is done. I'm putting the larger wheel back on, and I'm going to continue. I got all the little parts done. Now all that I have left are the slide tubes. I'm going to do those now. The silver plating is coming off fairly easily, and that is the reason why I normally do not buff silver plating. I finished buffing all of these pieces. The inner slides do not need to be buffed, and also the lead pipe does not need to be buffed. I'm going to buff these with a finer grained red rouge buffing compound, but I'm going to do that later when I buff and lacquer the whole instrument. But that is for a different video. Next Friday I'm going to make sure that there's the right amount of tubing on the instrument for it to be in tune, and also I'm going to start soldering the pieces together. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more band instrument repair videos, and look in the description below for links to related videos.